where and when were you born?
Born in Birmingham, Alabama. Hillman Hospital on the University of Alabama campus, Birmingham campus.
And what year was that?
1928.
Okay. So now you were born in Alabama. Was that was that a privileged lifestyle that you were leading there? Or?
Privilege?
Yes.
No.
No. Can you tell us
No
about
stretch of imagination. Now,
So,
the interesting thing though, I didn't stay long in Birmingham. My mother and father separated early, and she relocated back to Montgomery, which is her hometown, where her 4 sisters were and her 3 brothers. So somewhere in 1929, I moved from Birmingham to Montgomery.
okay, and then Montgomery, that's the capital. And did you get there in time to vote, or?
In time to vote?
Yeah.
Well, it was very difficult to vote in Alabama during those days because they asked foolish questions that there was no answer to, and you didn't have any recourse. You couldn't go anywhere and get help. You just had to take it, turn around, and walk back out because they had their own rules. Jim Crow was tough, and that was one of the things that Jim Crow was very able to do because they knew the power of the vote, and they certainly did not want us to have the power, so they used all kinds of gimmicks to keep us from voting, and it was legal to do so as well at that time.
So you lived under Jim Crow in Montgomery, Alabama, until when? What moved you? What pulled you or pushed you away from that town?
Well, once I reached high school, you start thinking about working in the summertime in between schools, so you could have a little money in your pocket. And of course, there were limited jobs in Montgomery for black people and young high school students as well. So I would come to Chicago and work at the U.S. Post Office at downtown at Canal and Van Buren each summer while I was in high school. That was my introduction to Chicago as well, yes.
Oh, that's a path I hadn't heard of.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in high school. Did that lead into your military? Did that lead into your military service?
Yeah, once I finished high school, I was a frustrated musician, trumpet player.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. So I was going to New York to be the Miles Davis of the world.
Oh, yeah.
But that was a snake hole.
You tried it?
I tried it, but the lifestyle was far below anything I ever wanted to engage in. So I had a little money when I got to New York, but after about 3 or 4 weeks, the money disappeared because of the cost of living and trying to maintain yourself. But I went with a neighbor friend, and I was staying with his relatives. So I didn't want to be an imposition on them. So I went downtown in New York. I don't know why I went downtown that particular day, but I was standing in Times Square. And today that enlistment office is still on Times Square, 70, 80 years later. So I said, I think I better go in the military, so at least I have a roof over my head and 3 squares.
I see, yeah.
So I signed up, and I was 17 at the time, and I needed my mother's signature. and the Army wasn't that strict. So I signed my mother's name and got in the military in 1946. And completed my military service as a musician in special service, and got out in '47, went back to Montgomery, enrolled in college under the GI Bill, and
What school?
Alabama State University. And that was my high school as well. The college had a lab high school. Several black colleges had a lab high school. Alabama State, Tuskegee, Jackson State, quite a few others. And during the war, just before, I'm backtracking now for a minute, but it's very important to include this. During the war, those schools that had lab high schools on that campus, the men were allowed to participate in college activity, particularly around the sports. We played college football and college basketball as a high school student because there were no men. Yeah.
So, did you play sports?
I played basketball, yes.
Good. So, how many years did you spend in the military?
18 months.
Oh, 18 months. Oh, okay. And it was all during a special duty or the blowing. You were playing your trumpet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the special unit.
Oh, okay.
I played in the orchestra and the marching band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I played in the orchestra and the marching band at college as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I played in the college band, and yeah.
So, when you got out of the military, did you pursue your musical aspirations?
No, as I said earlier, I wasn't very pleased with the lifestyle and all the things that I experienced. Yeah, so
That's right. Yeah.
I abandoned the whole idea.
Oh, okay.
So I said I would go back to Alabama State and finish, but that didn't happen either because I kept coming back to Chicago. Something kept drawing me to Chicago. I had this connection with Chicago, and it was strong. And as your wife mentioned earlier when I was talking about another subject, all my life I've been getting favor, and at the time, before I was saved, I didn't know it was favor. I thought it was just luck.
Let's see.
Yeah. So during my high school days, I met a family, the Cole family, at 600 East 42nd Street. And they had she had a rooming house. She used the second floor of her building for roomers. And anytime I would come to Chicago, whether I called her in advance or not, she would always have accommodations for me. Yeah, so I stayed with her in the early days of my stay here in Chicago. And during that time, Daley Sr., the old man, he was under a lot of pressure to increase the Chicago Police Department's numbers as well as the black policemen. So there was a movement to get black policemen to join the police department. I made application without any political help, and I went straight through. Favor again, straight through. Came out on the other end as a patrolman and served for 10 years. Yeah, under the segregated Chicago Police Department.
Segregated.
It was totally segregated.
Okay, totally. That means that what you had black and white. You were in different.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Yes.
I was in the class of 1956. It was 1960 before I saw the inside of a squad car.
What? That's a great example.
Yes. Yeah.
So you really walked your beat.
You walk a beat, or you could ride a three-wheeler.
Oh, okay.
But you had to slip something under the table to ride in the cold on a three-wheel.
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that Jim Crow and segregation and stuff, when I think back on it, it was just so stupid.
That's,
Didn't make any sense at all.
yeah, right. Mm. So during that time, did you have was Two Gun Pete on the force team?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I worked briefly with Pete,
Mm.
not with him personally, but we were out of the same police station.
Okay.
One of the most despicable persons I ever met in my entire life. Yes.
So, I know he was despicable. Nobody argued with you about that.
Yeah.
But so when did you get religion, as it were?
Well, while serving as the Chicago police, I realized I'd made another mistake in my life by joining the police force. Because it was not about serving and protecting people, it was about serving and protecting property.
Oh.
My whole training was about serving and protecting property. And the time that I served, the 10 years that I served, was about serving and protecting property.
And the property that you were assigned to was all on the black belt?
Well, you weren't really assigned per se. But if it comes to people or property, you protect the property.
Do you have an example on hand about to illustrate that?
Would you repeat that, Robbie?
Do you have an example to illustrate that?
Well, if a building was on fire with people in it, your first concern is to get the fire out, because you're working with the fire department, the police department work together, and save the building at any cost.
At the expense of the people, if necessary?
Yeah, if it comes down to that, yes.
Okay. They made that very clear to you.
Yeah. Well, they didn't make it clear. It was all subliminal.
Subliminal. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. But you soon got the message.
I get it.
Because there was punishment that went along with that if you didn't participate.
I see. Okay, it's like...
Whatever the perks they had for black policemen, you get none of them if you didn't participate. They weren't very much in the first place. But whatever they were, you could forget about ever getting it.
If you put people over property.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I get it.
You see, during those days, the people were totally engaged and dependent on the police department. So we didn't have the paramedics. So if you needed to go to the hospital, you called the police department, and they sent a squadron. And a squadron would take you to the hospital. So there was no such thing as paramedics. Any social services that you needed as a human being here in Chicago, you have to rely on the police department to get it if you could not provide those services yourself independently out of your own pocket.
Was that a segregated thing too? Because did the ambulance come for anybody? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
Ambulance squadron, what it wasn't ambulance, squadron.
So, for everybody, all citizens?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
The squadron accommodated the sick, the well, and the prisoners.
No matter what neighborhood you lived in?
It didn't matter what neighborhood you lived in, yeah.
Okay. So when did you get saved? And where?
When did I do what?
When did you get saved? And where?
A little over 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would be, oh.
Well, stepping back, I was baptized at 11 at Day Street Baptist Church in Montgomery.
I see.
But your question about when I was saved,
Yeah.
I was saved at Apostolic.
Okay.
Yeah,
Church.
yeah.
So I have a question. When you were born in Birmingham, you were only there a year. Did you ever return back to Birmingham?
No,
Never return back to
never
Birmingham?
returned, not to live.
To live, right.
Yes.
Right.
I go now because my sister's there
And what town is she in?
She's in Birmingham.
Oh, she's straight Birmingham.
She was born in Birmingham 30 years after me, my sister and my brother.
Is that,
I'm 30 and 31 years older than them.
is that right?
So that's how I get back to Birmingham all the time now, because they live in Birmingham.
Okay.
Hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, we're rooted in Birmingham now. My sister is a professor at Talladega.
Is that right?
My cousin is the dean at Alabama State, my school.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter,
Did you say Alabama State?
Alabama State, yeah. My daughter works in the same high school where her grandfather, my father worked, Parker High School, which at one time was the largest black high school in the country.
Hmm.
So we're rooted now in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started out as a clerk downtown at the main post office. Then I transferred to carrier. So I was a carrier for 5 years.
Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
Well, you're in high school.
Hmm?
While you're still going to high school.
No. This is after high school.
Oh, after high school?
Yeah.
Oh, after high school?
Yeah.
Look at the tape. All right, so then, okay. So, what you think, you're being baptized, or how you were raised in church, made you wary of New York life?
Well, it was the drug and the mistreatment. You couldn't stay in the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
The musicians couldn't, never treated her. And if you got a job, a gig they called it then, you had to go back and in the garbage bins when you went out on stage, you were in the garbage bins. I never lived that kind of lifestyle, so I didn't like that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't afford to buy meals?
No, you were working. You were working in a theater, in a restaurant, bar-type restaurant. Once you come down off the stage, you couldn't go in, they didn't have a dressing room for you. You'd have to go where the garbage bins were and stay there until you go back on stage.
Mm.
Just an inhumane
I see.
type of situation that I wasn't familiar with.
This is in Harlem?
Yes, and in Manhattan.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, we worked downtown. It was better in Harlem because Harlem was primarily black,
Mm-hmm.
and you did have some things that were comparable to Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
But when you worked Manhattan, you knew what you had to do. Very uncomfortable. You were expected to give your best, but you lived under the worst circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And at another stage of my life, I can talk about that too, because I don't want to get ahead of you. Yeah. Well, while I was a Chicago policeman, I became the manager, road manager for Dinah Washington. So I had some of that same experience with her because I was her manager. She and I could stay in the hotel, but our dancing group and the other singing group, the Dells, which was part of my group, they couldn't stay in the hotel.
Mm.
They had to stay in rooming houses. So there were rooming houses all around the United States to accommodate black entertainers.
Mm.
The stars could sing and stay in the hotel along with their managers, but the others had to stay in rooming houses.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Could you take the same elevator in a hotel?
Yes, you could. Yeah. Yeah, didn't have those problems. You could even eat in the hotel.
Oh.
Yeah, but you just couldn't stay there.
Oh, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what were you doing about 30 years ago when you got saved at Apostolic?
Okay. Well, when I retired, took an early retirement from the police department, I hooked up with Al Raby.
Al Raby.
Yes. Al Raby and I were doing the marches downtown in Chicago. We would march from Buckingham Fountain to State Madison every day. And then we would sit in the middle of State and Madison, disrupt everything. And then we were trained to get out before the police would come and of course, arrest us.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get lost in the system then if they ever arrest you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 3 or 4 days before your family find you. So, during that period, I became familiar with Bishop Brazier because that was part of the time that he was heavily involved in the civil rights movement, along with Al Raby. Matter of fact, they were close, as a matter of fact. And I started watching this guy, and I said, this guy is something, you know, and Bishop Brazier. So at that point, I fell in love with him, and then I decided I was having a conversation with my wife at the dinner table, at the breakfast table one morning. I said, I need to find out more. She said, why don't you go to his church? And I did. One of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life. I've been there ever since. I don't think I missed a Sunday, with the exception of 1 or 2, since I made that decision.
Wow.
Mm.
So great.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get married in Chicago or in Montgomery?
I got married in Chicago.
Awesome.
I got married at Metropolitan, 41st and King Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pastor Richardson married my wife and I. Yeah, he was the pastor of Metropolitan at that time. He's going on to be with the Lord now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 1966, I got married.
1966. So, you want to share anything about your wife? You want to share anything about your wife? You got married in 66?
Yeah, she was a non-practicing Catholic, 3 generations.
Oh.
3 generations.
3 generations, most unusual.
So you were married for how long?
50 years.
15?
50.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So what do you do with Apostolic? You've been a member of Apostolic for 30 years?
Over 30, yes.
Over 30.
Mm.
Can you describe your journey as far at Apostolic for those 30 years? Where'd you start? Where you're at?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, in the beginning, I was a bench warmer
Mm-hmm.
for a few months, and then I heard about the daytimers, and I was available on Tuesdays, so I would come to the
How
daytime.
long ago was that? Daytime? You heard?
About 30 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
It goes back that far. I didn't know.
And I would join them on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And James Cole and Brother Lyman approached me one day and said, listen, you come every Tuesday. We need someone to serve on baptism. I said, man, what in the world is that? I said, well, sure, we'll train you.
Yeah.
So I was introduced to baptism in the early days of the daytime. The daytime had just gotten started. And I was alone a server on baptism before Mother Huddleston.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, and then Brother Brown was Elder Scott's assistant. Brother Brown had to resign because he went back to work. So Scott asked me would I serve as the co-director. That's how we created the word co. Before that, it was moderator.
Yeah.
All ministers were referred to as moderator.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott said, I'm going to make you the co-director because I won't be here. And you'll have to facilitate. So that's how I got involved with the daytimers. And for years, Scott would come only when his job would permit him to come. And sometimes he wouldn't come then, but he was very comfortable with me facilitating. So that was the beginning, and the whole process the daytimer. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. What do the daytimers do?
What do they do?
Yes.
They serve a very useful service, a need for most churches, if not all, to accommodate those who want to know more about Jesus and can't come at the traditional Wednesday night service, which are most that night. They can come in the daytime as their schedule permits and receive the Word of God in a manner which will be pleasing to God as well as pleasing to them.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And so, you're most is it are most participants in the daytimers are senior citizens?
Yes, I would say 90% are seniors, but we do have some juniors as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, is you for your political career, or you say your social justice, you had social justice piece with Al Raby,
Mm-hmm.
and then but then I heard that you told me once that you were involved in picking a candidate for.
Yes,
Okay, can you tell me about that?
sure. Well, it just mushroomed from Al Raby into the community work. I joined Reverend my God, I'm having a senior moment.
You're doing great. We won't hold you much longer because
Oh, Lord.
we all need a nap.
Yeah, I joined Reverend Al Sampson.
Al Sampson, sure.
Yeah, Sampson and I hooked up 30 years ago as well. After Raby, I went with Sampson.
Okay.
He was, and we created a movement called the Metropolitan Area Planning Corporation. And we also created the Soul Slate PAC. We were the only black PAC in the United States. And we were the second black PAC in the United States. The first black PAC was under Al Cadillac. He has a Cadillac company. He used to be very involved in the civil rights movement back in the day. They had a PAC. And we created one using that same pattern. And through the political PAC, we would interview all the candidates for running for various offices in Illinois, the county, as well as the city. And those running for federal government as well. As a matter of fact, I personally interviewed Barack Obama when he ran for the Senate seat. Matter of fact, I interviewed him the first time he ran for the House of Representatives and Laws. Then I interviewed him when he ran for the U.S. Senate. And we had a phone conversation when he ran for the presidency. So for 30 years I participated in those organizations and those movements. And it was quite an experience, particularly out of the Soul Slate. Yes, I got to know all the politicians. And we would make a decision based on our board. We had a large board. We would bring the candidates before the board. They would give their position. Then we would excuse them and have a closed session and vote on the candidates for the various positions in the state, county, federal, and city. Okay, when my mother and father separated, we moved back to Montgomery. I lived on Jeff Davis Avenue in Montgomery. The landlord This is 1929, 1930. Was a truant officer, a black female truant officer in 1930.
Wow.
Her son became a medical doctor. Across the street from me was a Pryor family. There were 2 boys and a girl. Mrs. Pryor taught me in grade school. The oldest boy, we're still in 1930s now, became a dentist and a medical doctor.
And a medical doctor.
Yes. And practiced for years until he died in Montgomery, renowned. The youngest boy, who I grew up with, was my personal friend, became a lawyer and a judge
Wow.
in the 1930s at Montgomery, segregated Montgomery, Alabama. And speaking of that crazy form of government that was legal, my father finished Alabama State in 1932.
Your father did?
Yeah, 1932. He and some others researched the laws in Alabama and found that it could not be accepted at any state school in the South, the 13 states. But if they made application to any college in the United States and was accepted, their respective states would have to pick up the full tab. So my father went to Columbia in New York, took his wife, my stepmother, with him. Well, she had 2 degrees already from Alabama State, as his secretary. Got his master's from Columbia. And Alabama picked up the entire tab for he and his wife. Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense at all, does it? How do you make sense of a crazy law like that?
Isn't it
Yeah,
something? And they researched that.
yes. And Arthurine Lucy, who integrated Alabama State, her daughter became an employee under my sister.
So Alabama State was not a historically black college?
Not what?
Alabama State is not a historically black college?
What kind of black college?
Historically.
Yes.
It is?
Oh, it is. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to share something else with you around that time period. During the Montgomery bus boycott, in order to accommodate the people who were not riding the buses, they needed a staging area so they could bring all the trucks, pickup trucks and cars and whatever motor vehicle you had to take people to work. My family owned the parking lot in Montgomery, Alabama. And the white people didn't know it. They were parking on that lot and paying us every day to park.
I've seen that featured on a movie.
Hmm?
I've seen that featured on a movie.
Yeah,
But that was
that was my family.
your family.
Yeah. They took the property away from us once it was discovered that we owned it under eminent domain.
Mm.
And that's the crazy law said if it benefits the people, you could take the property.
Mm.
Put my cousin, who owned the property, he and his wife, in jail. He didn't put his wife in jail, put him in jail, and took the property. About 6 or 7 years ago, my cousin, who is the dean of the Learning Center at Alabama State, I was in conversation with her, and I said, Janice, where is all the civil rights stuff that was so prevalent during the Montgomery bus boycott? She said, I really don't know. I said, would you see if you can find out where it is? Because several of the teachers at Alabama State were fired because of that participation. They were doing a mimeograph thing where you get the dial over your hand, making copies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So she got busy after that, and she found all those teachers, and they had saved all of that information. She brought it back to the Learning Center with permission from the president, and they locked it up in the basement down in the Learning Center. And that's where it is now, under lock and key. But all that information has been preserved so that they can't steal it from it and make it something else. Yeah.
That's great.
So were you an entrepreneur doing other things when not working for any governmental agency?
Yes. Yeah, I was a devil, like the rest of us who were not saved. Just before I retired from the police department, I bought a tavern.
Oh.
So I had a nice bar on 79th Street. Are you familiar with Alzola's restaurant?
Yeah.
Azola's, yes.
Yeah, Alzola and I moved on 79th Street at the same time. She opened a restaurant, I opened a bar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See,
So I had a bar for a number of years
mm.
in Chicago, yeah.
Oh, boy, that's history. Azola's restaurant.
Yes. Bless her heart. She was a wonderful lady, too.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Well, we know that you do a number of things for the church, for the community, in the politics. We know that even at your church you have brought several speakers in during your daytime service to let them know what's going on politically and medically, what they need to know about insurance, what they need to know about Social Security benefits and health care and things of that sort. And I find that's interesting. How do you find the people, before COVID, you were doing a lot of this, how did you find the people that you brought to the church?
You know, in my travel during my world days, I met these people. And when they found out I was at the church, they came to me. I was easier to find than me finding them. So many of them had also been saved and were doing other things. And they found out what was going on at Apostolic, and they found out that I was part of that ministry. They came running. So I really can't take credit for that.
Okay.
Yes, they found me. And I was so happy because we were able to put many programs that helped a lot of people
Yes.
over the years, yes. And we still are.
And we still are.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that because I know that a lot of people have told me that they've gotten reverse mortgages.
Yeah.
They've gotten insurance where they can go to the gym and do things like that.
Yeah.
Several different things that people were able to do. I've even heard where people didn't know they can get home health care people to come in and help them with their duties around the house that they're no longer able to lift and things, and they found out they can get that also.
Yeah, well, Ken Biven, I really didn't meet him in the world. He noticed me in church, because he and his wife were members of Apostolic for a long time. And they would stop by and say hello to me when they were leaving the first service. And then he got into the healthcare service. So then he thought about me, and he called me and let me know that he had all these services available. And he was just an angel. He still is an angel. And that was how we were able to get most of those kinds of programs in place through Ken Biven. Mm-hmm. Well, back to the favor part.
Sure.
I was part of a group that met every Wednesday at Valois's down in Hyde Park. So it was about 4 or 5 of us, and we would all sit at one table. And one of the guys in the group was quite renowned. He was the the first NBA official,
Mm.
and he had a long history of the West Side movement around athletics and training boys to be men,
Mm-hmm.
and he was part of the group.
Mm.
And when Barack Obama was elected, we were in our regular meeting, and all of a sudden, one of ABC guys came over to me and asked me who was I, and I said, "What do you mean, who am I?" I said, "I'm just a little country boy from Alabama." So we started there, and he said, "I need to interview you and your table." And I said, "Only if you promise that it'll be on the news. If it's not going to be on the news, then there's no point in me wasting my time, because I don't know why you would need it." He said, "I promise you." He's a big-time ABC man now doing the foreign news. So he did it, and he put it on. I was on for about 5 or 10 minutes. I don't know if you ever had the occasion to see it.
No,
Yeah, it was quite interesting. He asked good questions, I had good answers, and we just had a good time.
Wonderful.
And it was just like he had just joined us as a friend. It didn't come off as a news item, you know? And I was very impressed with him at the time, because being a white boy and feeling privileged, I was surprised that he would bring himself down to our level and act human. He showed the human side of him, and I was very impressed with that. That's just a little bit of the favor stuff. And we took a group to the inauguration too, for that particular. We took a daytime group.
Oh, inauguration.
Yeah, we took a group, big group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we took a train to,
Oh, the daytimes?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to Washington.
Okay.
And I got as close to him, to the Capitol, as I am now to the Capitol of Springfield. That's how far away we were from it. Had a tune of about $2,000 each. Mm. Oh, Lord.
I got a T-shirt.
where you went.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Closer to March of Washington back in '68.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. Okay.
Well, what about, since we brought it up, for March on Washington, where were you?
I didn't go to the march where I couldn't get off.
Oh, you couldn't get off?
It was a handful that they picked to be off. They wanted to go. And I wasn't one of them, because I
From the
was,
post office?
no, police department.
From the police department?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't get favored that time. Most time I get favored. I didn't get it that
He got his
time.
ways to keep us from
You probably
sin,
didn't.
hurt, harm, and danger.
Yeah.
And my partner, who could care less, was one of those selected.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he
Really?
could care less.
Careless.
Did you know Harold Washington?
Hmm?
Did you know Mayor Harold Washington?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Oh, my God.
Please share.
Oh, well, I'm going to say this, because it was so important to me. I never had any use for politicians, because they never look you in the eye.
Mm.
Mayor Washington was the only politician that looked me in the eye when I was in line to say hello to him, held my hand the whole time, and never took his attention away from me. Wasn't looking over his shoulder, over my shoulder, to find somebody important. That's what kind of man that man was, yes. I enjoyed that in him. Yes, and we shall see in '83.
Yeah.
We
So
shall
those
see in '83.
Yeah.
Lou Palmer.
Oh, okay, Lou Palmer.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had some
Lou Palmer.
Run and tell that.
run and tell that. Make a Negro turn black. It's enough to make a Negro turn black.
It's enough to make a Negro turn black.
Yeah. Oh, those were some good days.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're
Brother
welcome. Thanks for having me.
sharing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Such rich history, such rich stories to tell, you know. I'm so glad the Lord has blessed you. We love you, but we want the whole world to love you. So many do.
Thank you, Brother Williams,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your contribution to the world and to the church at large. Thank you for your service.
Yes. And your friendship along with your lovely wife has been a high point of my life.
That's a long life.
Yes, yes. I
That's
mean
a
that
long
from the
life.
bottom
You
of my
just
heart.
made 94, right?
94, yes.
Well,
Yes, Lord.
I'm glad we were on the same road, so we
Yeah.
meet each other. Okay. Thanks again, Brother Williams.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for having me.
My blessing. My blessing.
Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me.
That was one of Mama's
Yes,
favorite
Lord.
songs to sing when she was watching the Greens.
Yes, yes, yes. There's something about that name.
Something about that name. There's something.
King's kingdom shall all fade away.
Yeah.
But there's something about that name. Jesus.